The morning air over St. Lo was cold enough to sting exposed skin. Charles Carpenter pulled his flight gloves tight, felt the rough seams bite into his fingers, and stared at the object bolted under his left wing. 2 M1A1 bazookas, infantry weapons, not aircraft armament. Illegal. Laughable. His crew chief said it 3 times that morning. "Sir, this is madness." Carpenter said nothing. He checked the wiring again. 60 feet of scavenged copper stripped from a wrecked communications truck. It ran from the cockpit, down the strut, to the trigger solenoids taped in place with brown radio operator's tape. The tape wrinkled in the cold. He pressed it flat with this thumb. The M1A1 tubes weighed 14.9 pounds each. Without their infantry harnesses, they were awkward cylinders with no mounting points. He solved that problem the night before. 2 steel brackets cut from a destroyed German field kitchen. They were still blackened from fire. He drilled holes by hand. He did it in 12 minutes. His superiors had inspected the job in the dark. They had stood in silence for a full 5 seconds. One captain started laughing. He said it looked like a circus act. He asked Carpenter if he planned to hunt elephants. Carpenter did not laugh. The Stinson L-4 Grasshopper sat in the grass beside him. It weighed 740 pounds empty. Its Continental O170 engine produced 65 horsepower. That was enough to lift reconnaissance maps, a pilot, and a camera. Not enough for armor. Not enough for weapons. The Germans called it a cloth coffin. Carpenter's L-4 had canvas skin stretched over spruce ribs. A .30 caliber bullet could punch through both sides in a single pass. He knew this. He had paced around the aircraft on the first day he flew it in 1942. He counted 412 square feet of fabric. The wind rattled it when the engine idled. The infantry laughed because he welded bazookas to it. The officers laughed because the manuals forbade it. The mechanics laughed because they thought the recoil would tear the wings off. Carpenter ran tests. He placed the bazooka tubes on sawhorses and triggered them with a battery. The recoil measured under 2 foot-pounds. Harmless. He wrote it down in a notebook. The real danger came from weight. 29.8 pounds of tubes, 8.5 pounds of rockets, 38.3 pounds total. He compared that to the standard L-4 load capacity of 170 pounds. It fit. Just barely. He would take fewer rations, carry less fuel, and no pistol. That morning, he pulled out his pocket watch. The glass was scratched. He had dropped it during the breakout at Avranche. The second hand twitched. He listened to the ticking. It kept his nerves steady. He checked the sky. A low ceiling of clouds covered the valley. His commanding officer approached. He asked if Carpenter intended to embarrass the regiment. Carpenter said no. He intended to kill tanks. The officer shook his head. Tanks were for Thunderbolt pilots, for Sherman crews. Not for a man in a plane with lawnmower horsepower. Carpenter climbed into the cockpit. The leather seat was cracked. The foam inside smelled of mildew. He pressed his knees under the yoke and checked the firing switch, a toggle made from a broken radio knob. It clicked sharply. He liked the sound. He pushed the primer 3 times. The engine coughed. On the 4th pull, it caught. The propeller spun with a metallic whine. The whole aircraft vibrated like an unbalanced washing machine. Carpenter let it warm for 20 seconds. The field was muddy. His wheels sank half an inch with each bounce. He pushed throttle to full. The engine wailed. The airframe shivered. The L-4 rolled forward at 22 miles per hour. It needed only 175 feet to lift. That morning it used 192. The extra weight mattered. Once airborne, he watched the hedgerows blur beneath him. Normandy was a patchwork of fields, orchards, and scars. Black lines marked German artillery positions. Smoke columns marked the push toward the interior. Carpenter flew at 700 feet, just under the cloud layer. He reached his reconnaissance sector. His official job was simple: spot targets, report coordinates, guide artillery. Nothing else. He had done it for weeks. He had memorized the blast radius of the M2-105. 33 meters of lethal fragmentation. He had also memorized the armor of German tanks. Tiger with frontal armor, 100 mm. Side armor, 80 mm. Rear armor, 80 mm. Top armor, 25 mm. The bazooka rocket, the M6A3, could penetrate 3.5 inches of steel. That was 88.9 millimeters. Enough to punch through the top. That was Carpenter's theory. Attack from above. Bury the rocket into the roof. He carried 6 rockets, 3 per tube. He would get 1 pass, maybe 2. After that, the Germans would fire. The MG-34 machine gun fired at 900 rounds per minute. At that rate, they would stitch an L-4 in half. Below him, columns of German armor moved along a dirt road. He counted them: 1 Panther, 2 Panzer IVs, and 1 Tiger. He recognized the squared turret, the long 88mm barrel. It looked like a lance pointed at the horizon. His heart beat slow. Not fast. Slow. He studied the Tiger. The crew stood on the hull. They smoked. One man cleaned mud from the rear deck with a rag. They did not expect aircraft this low, and not aircraft this small. Carpenter banked left gently. The L-4 was fragile. Too much angle, and it lost lift. He lined up the Tiger from behind. The top armor glistened with morning moisture. 25 millimeters. Soft compared to the turret face. He flipped the toggle switch. The wiring buzzed faintly. The copper warmed under the current. He aimed the nose downward. The airspeed increased, 73 miles per hour. The L-4 frame rattled. His knees pressed harder against the yoke. The first rocket fired. A white flash erupted under the wing. The recoil thumped the airframe. The rocket traced a thin smoke line downward. It struck the engine deck. A plume of fire blossomed. Not a kill yet, but damage. The German crew reacted instantly. One man jumped off the hull. Another reached for the hatch. The machine gunner swung his MG-34 upward. Carpenter fired his second rocket. It hit just behind the turret ring. Another burst of flame. The MG-34 barked. Tracers flew past the wing. One round grazed the canvas. It sliced a 3-inch tear. Carpenter did not look at it. He fired the third rocket. It hit the turret roof. This one mattered. The explosion blew fragments upward like sparks from an anvil. Carpenter pulled the L-4 upward too sharply. The engine sputtered. The wings wobbled. He lost 40 feet of altitude. He corrected with a tiny push forward. The aircraft leveled barely above the treetops. Below, the Tiger burned. Smoke rose thick and black. The crew bailed out, coughing. Carpenter climbed back into the cloud layer. He had 3 rockets left for the remaining tanks. The infantry below radioed in. They had spotted armor halted behind the destroyed Tiger. Carpenter tilted his wings. He descended again. The Panther sat still. Its crew scanned the sky. They looked the wrong way, toward the horizon, not straight up. Carpenter lined up the Panther. He repeated his calculation. Top armor, 30 millimeters. Rocket penetration, 3.5 inches. It would go through clean. He fired one rocket. It hit the turret top. The hatch blew open. A man scrambled out, rolling off the side. The second rocket fired prematurely. It left the tube, spiraled, and struck a hedgerow. Carpenter cursed once. Short. Precise. He steadied the plane. The third rocket hit the Panther's rear deck. Flames spread across the engine bay. German machine guns opened up again. This time, 2 of them. MG-42s. Faster. 1,200 rounds per minute. One tracer streaked under his fuselage. Another clipped the landing gear strut. Metal sparked. He felt the jolt through the rudder pedals. Carpenter climbed again. The L-4 groaned. The engine strained. The temperature gauge ticked into the red for 2 seconds before recovering. Oil pressure held. Barely. He circled wide. He needed altitude. He needed space to breathe. Below, the Germans moved men into firing positions. He saw them scatter around the burning tanks like ants disturbed by a boot. His hands shook slightly. Not fear. Cold. The cockpit had no insulation. At altitude, the wind seeped through the seams and iced his knuckles. He flexed his fingers. He inspected his remaining rockets. 2 left. Not enough to kill all 4 tanks. Enough to change the balance. Enough to frighten a company. The Panzer IVs remained intact. Both turret hatches closed. Both barrels pointed outward, scanning. Carpenter chose the right one. It was closer to the open field. Easier attack angle, lower flak density. He began his descent. Slow at first, then steeper. The L-4 shuddered. The wires hummed. The wings creaked. He felt every vibration through the seat frame. He triggered the first rocket. It launched clean. It struck the Panzer IV's turret top. The explosion blew a thin plume of dust. The tank stopped moving. Not a kill, but a wound. The second rocket misaligned. It wobbled on exit. It hit the ground beside the tank. Dirt erupted. Carpenter banked away. The Panzer IV turret rotated toward him. The 75mm gun followed his path. It moved slowly at first, then faster. The gunner adjusted for lead. Carpenter dove low, almost brushing the tree line. A shell fired. It missed by 50 feet. Carpenter climbed again. The L-4 jumped in the air like a spooked animal. The engine knocked. He pulled the mixture back slightly. The knocking eased. Below him, the German armor column lay in ruins or smoke. One Tiger destroyed. One Panther burning. One Panzer IV disabled. One surviving tank retreating. He radioed the coordinates to artillery. His voice was steady. He gave grid numbers, range, and wind direction. Artillery responded with a single word. On! Minutes later, the ground shook. High explosive shells tore through the last Panzer IV. Carpenter watched from above. The turret lifted an inch, then settled sideways. Infantry advanced behind the barrage. They moved cautiously. Some men stopped to stare at the burning Tiger. One soldier pointed up at Carpenter's plane. He shook his head in disbelief. Carpenter circled once. He looked down at the battlefield. He counted the tanks again. 1, 2, 3, 5 by his tally. 5 destroyed or disabled. His bazookas made the first marks. Artillery finished the rest. He flew back toward base. The engine sputtered twice. The canvas tear fluttered loudly. The smell of burned rocket propellant lingered in the cockpit. It smelled metallic and sharp. At the airfield, mechanics waited with hands on hips. They watched him land. The L-4 bounced once, then settled. The wheels sprayed mud onto their boots. Carpenter rolled to a stop. He shut the engine off. Silence replaced vibration. His ears rang. The crew chief walked to the wing. He looked at the scorched bazooka tubes. He looked at the burn marks on the brackets. He touched the torn fabric with 2 fingers. His jaw worked, but he did not speak. Carpenter climbed out. His legs were stiff. He stepped onto the wing root and dropped to the ground. Mud splashed. Officers gathered. They asked questions rapidly. How close did he fly? How many rockets hit? How many tanks disabled? Carpenter answered each one without emotion. One captain inspected the modified wiring. He shook his head. This should not work. Carpenter agreed, but it worked anyway. They examined the tubes. The paint blistered. The metal warped slightly from heat. The brackets remained firm. Carpenter tapped them with his knuckles. Solid. A lieutenant measured the tear in the canvas covering. 3 inches long. Clean slice. MG-34 round. It missed the wing spar by less than 2 inches. Carpenter looked at the spar. Intact. He noted it in his mind, not his face. Word spread quickly. Someone wrote down that he had destroyed 5 tanks. Someone else said 6. Someone else said he had alone halted a company-sized armored push. Carpenter disagreed. He said the artillery and infantry had finished the job. His bazookas only opened the door. Soldiers from a passing convoy stopped to stare. They pointed at the tubes. One man laughed, not mockingly, in disbelief. He asked if the rockets were real. Carpenter nodded once. A photographer arrived. He snapped 3 pictures of the L-4, one from the front, one from the wing, one from the cockpit. Carpenter did not pose. The colonel arrived next. He looked at the aircraft for a long time, then at Carpenter, then back at the aircraft. He exhaled slowly. He asked Carpenter if he intended to fly it again. Carpenter said yes. The colonel blinked. Twice. Carpenter explained that the bazookas could be reloaded in 9 minutes. The brackets held under recoil. The wiring only needed tightening. The plane could carry 12 rockets if weight allowed. The colonel asked if he was aware of the regulation against unauthorized armament. Carpenter said yes. The colonel asked if he believed the regulation applied to him. Carpenter said no. The men around them did not laugh this time. They inspected the L-4 again. The landing gear pin was bent. The engine cowling had a small dent from debris. The tailwheel mudguard had cracked. These were minor. The aircraft was airworthy. Barely. Carpenter said he needed fuel and 6 more rockets. The colonel stared at him, then ordered the supply sergeant to bring the rockets. Technicians reloaded the tubes. They slid each rocket in carefully. The fins clinked against the steel edges. Carpenter watched every movement. The crew chief asked if he wanted the canvas tear patched. Carpenter said no. It was cosmetic. Weight mattered. One mechanic pointed at the control cables. They were frayed. Carpenter traced them with his fingers. He judged them safe for 1 more sortie. Maybe 2. The colonel asked where he intended to fly next. Carpenter told him. Toward the German retreat lines. Armor columns regrouped there. He had seen dust clouds from the air. The colonel nodded slowly. He asked Carpenter for one thing: a written account of what happened. Carpenter said he would file it after the next flight. The colonel told him that was not what he meant. He wanted the exact steps, the wiring, the brackets, the measurements. Carpenter understood. The colonel wanted replication. Other pilots gathered around. They studied the tubes. They took notes. One asked about rocket drop. Carpenter said the rockets lost accuracy past 140 yards. Another pilot asked how close he had flown on the Tiger. Carpenter told him. Close enough to see the loader's gloves. The pilots looked at one another. Some nodded. Some swallowed hard. Some walked away silently. The colonel authorized the next flight. He told Carpenter that if he died, the report must still be filed. Carpenter climbed back into the cockpit. His gloves stiffened in the cold. He checked the toggle switch again. The click sounded louder this time. The engine started on the second pull. The vibrations returned. Familiar. Sharp. The bazooka tubes hung under the wings like improvised fangs. Steam drifted from the grass as the engine warmed. Carpenter watched the horizon. The wind shifted. A cold gust blew from the northeast. Good. It meant clear air above the ridge. He pushed the throttle. The L-4 lurched forward. Mud kicked up behind the wheels. The engine whined at full power. The aircraft lifted again. Once in the air, Carpenter turned east. The sun broke through the clouds briefly. It painted the wings gold. The bazooka tubes glinted. He climbed to 900 feet. The air cooled instantly. He zipped his jacket tighter. The zipper stuck halfway. He left it. Below, a convoy moved along the road. Trucks, horse-drawn carts, and another Tiger at the rear. Carpenter adjusted his angle to intercept. He reached for the firing toggle once more. His glove brushed it lightly. He steadied his hand. He studied the Tiger. New markings. Fresh paint. Not the same crew. New men. New target. He lowered the nose. The engine surged. The frame shook. He felt every bolt in the wings protest. He began his dive. The rockets waited. The wind roared louder as the L-4 dropped. Carpenter felt the force against the control surfaces. The plane trembled from the speed it was never meant to reach. He held the dive until the Tiger filled half the windscreen. The German crew spotted him late. One man pointed upward, shouting something unheard through the engine's rasp. The turret began to rotate. Too slow. Carpenter flicked the toggle. The first rocket leapt from the tube. White smoke streaked past the wing strut. The rocket hit short. It punched into the dirt just behind the Tiger. A fountain of earth swallowed half the rear deck. He steadied the aircraft. His left wing dipped from turbulence. He corrected with a sharp counter-input. The L-4 groaned. The second rocket fired. This one traveled clean and straight. The rocket struck the Tiger's turret roof. A flash of orange burst across the steel. The loader's hatch flipped open from pressure. A brief geyser of flame escaped from the gap. Carpenter pulled up. The L-4 resisted. It climbed sluggishly. Engine straining. The wings flexed in a way he did not like. He eased back slightly to avoid a stall. Tracers flew upward from the ground. MG-42 fire. The sound reached him in broken rattles between engine pulses. One long burst ripped through the air behind him, missing by inches. The Tiger did not stop. It continued forward. Smoke drifted from the roof, but the engine kept running. The turret rotated faster. The gunner corrected his aim. Carpenter banked hard left. The L-4's canvas wing quivered. He lost 35 feet of altitude that he could not spare. The Tiger fired. The shell screamed past the tail, close enough to throw hot shards of dirt into the air. Carpenter angled away low. The treetops whipped past under him. Branches blurred. One twig scraped the landing gear. He clenched his jaw. He checked his rocket count. One left. A single chance. He climbed again, slowly, giving the aircraft time to breathe. The engine temperature crept upward. He tapped the gauge with a finger. It didn't change. He circled wide above an orchard. The Tiger below slowed to a crawl. The crew seemed unsure whether he still had ammunition. Carpenter watched the turret traverse. They scanned the horizon, not the sky. He took a shallow angle this time, a glide more than a dive, less stress on the airframe, more control. The L-4 leveled into position, nose pointed toward the Tiger's engine deck. The German commander opened the cupola. He leaned out, scanning. Carpenter saw his goggles flash in the sunlight. A split second of eye contact separated them. Carpenter flipped the toggle. The final rocket fired. It streaked downward. No wobble, no correction needed. A perfect, clean trajectory. The rocket struck the engine deck dead center. A flat, heavy thud followed. Then, fire. Thick black smoke erupted upward like a chimney erupting soot. The Tiger stopped moving. Men scrambled out. Flames licked along the rear armor plates. The engine bay glowed faintly. Carpenter banked away before the ammunition could cook off. He climbed to 600 feet, enough to breathe. The wind cut across his face through a seam in the canopy. Cold, sharp. He let it steady him. The German convoy scattered. Trucks veered off the road. Horses reared. Soldiers threw themselves into ditches. Carpenter watched without expression. He radioed artillery again. He marked the coordinates with precise numbers. The reply came 10 seconds later. Firing for effect. Shells landed in tight clusters. They walked across the convoy like controlled footsteps. Trucks exploded in orange bursts. A cart flipped. A telephone pole snapped. Carpenter drifted above the destruction. The L-4 felt lighter without the rockets. The plane climbed easier. The wings hummed pleasantly in the wind. He circled once, twice. No movement came from the Tiger. Flames continued. Ammunition inside popped faintly. The steel plates glowed dull red. He banked north. The sky grew darker ahead. Smoke from another front drifted upward like a curtain. He headed toward it. 10 minutes later, he spotted a column crossing a narrow bridge. 3 armored cars. 1 half-track. No heavy armor. Easier targets. He descended, careful this time. Without rockets, he could not engage directly, but he could disrupt them. He flew low over the bridge at 40 feet. The German column halted instantly. Men ducked. One panicked driver reversed too quickly. The half-track hit the bridge rail. Wood splintered. Carpenter climbed again, drew them into panic, then called artillery. He marked the bridge. The gunners responded in under a minute. A shell landed directly on the bridge. The wooden planks shattered. The structure sagged, then collapsed. The vehicles tumbled into the water. Carpenter turned west. The L-4's engine thrummed at a steady rhythm now. He eased the throttle back slightly to save fuel. He scanned the ground. Nothing moved except scattered infantry. They had no armor, no heavy guns. He continued searching. A distant column appeared beyond a ridge. He saw tank silhouettes again. Larger. He blinked once to clear his eyes. 3 Tiger IIs, the heavy beasts. 68 tons each. Armor thick enough to shrug off bazooka hits from the front. He checked his empty tubes. No rockets, no chance of direct kills. But he could mark them. Direct artillery. Disrupt movements. Harass their advance. He climbed to 1,100 feet and circled. The Tiger IIs moved with slow confidence. They did not expect air threats. Their top armor measured 40 mm, still vulnerable to a well-placed rocket. But he had none. He shadowed them, waiting, watching, searching for any weakness. Perhaps ammunition trucks trailing behind, fuel carriers, soft targets. He found them. 2 Opel Blitz fuel trucks, barely armored, parked near the tree line. He smiled faintly, a rare expression. He dropped altitude. The L-4 descended to 150 feet. The engine smoothed out. The frame cut cleanly through the air. German soldiers pointed upward. Their shouts carried faintly. Carpenter angled toward the fuel trucks. He passed at treetop height. The prop wash kicked dust across the convoy. He circled back and buzzed them again, forcing a pause in movement. Then he called artillery. He marked the fuel trucks with absolute precision. He repeated the coordinates twice. The first shell missed by 8 yards. The second hit the first truck. It erupted in a fireball that rolled across the ground. The second truck ignited seconds later. The Tiger IIs halted. Flames blocked their path. Carpenter watched the fire consume everything in a bright storm. He drifted higher. Slowly, carefully. He checked the engine temperature again. Back in the safe zone. He heard a distant call on the radio. Infantry requesting air recon near a crossroads 2 miles north. Carpenter banked and changed direction. The horizon flashed with artillery strikes. The ground shook faintly, even at altitude. A column of black smoke rose where the crossroads should be. Carpenter descended to verify. He saw 2 destroyed half-tracks. One flipped on its side. German infantry scattered among hedges. They fired sporadically at shadows. He marked their positions, accurate down to the nearest tree cluster. The infantry below thanked him with a short message. He said nothing in return. He turned south. His fuel gauge dipped lower. Less than half a tank, enough for 40 minutes. He judged distance back to base. Manageable, but tight. Another convoy moved along the southern road. Smaller vehicles, no armor, trucks with canvas covers, possibly carrying ammunition. Carpenter descended. A burst of MG fire rose from the convoy. He veered right. The tracers missed by 10 feet. He climbed and circled behind them, calling artillery again. The gunners responded instantly, familiarity in their voices now. They trusted his marks. Explosions tore through the road. The trucks disintegrated. Carpenter banked away sharply as debris flew upward. The wind caught the wing. The L-4 shivered. He tapped the rudder pedal lightly to regain balance. The battlefield grew quiet. Smoke drifted across the fields. Flames flickered from wrecked vehicles. Carpenter adjusted his heading back toward base. The engine's tone shifted. A slight, uneven pulse. He leaned forward, listening. Valve chatter. Minor. Manageable. He pushed the throttle gently. The sound evened. He continued. The ground passed beneath him in wide stretches of scarred earth. Craters. Burned trees. Abandoned equipment. War debris littered the landscape like bones. A solitary tiger. I sat near a collapsed farmhouse. Its turret was turned backward. No movement. Possibly abandoned. Carpenter circled once to confirm. No heat shimmer from the exhaust. No crew visible. He marked its coordinates anyway. Artillery liked certainty. He climbed to 900 feet. The fuel gauge dipped lower still. Time mattered now. A squad of German infantry spotted him and fired wildly. Most rounds fell short. One ricocheted off the landing gear. He felt the vibration through the pedals. He kept course. The air grew colder. A gust rocked the tail. The L-4 wobbled, then steadied. Carpenter gripped the yoke tighter. The field came into view. Muddy. Scarred with ruts. The windsock hung limp. Good conditions. He reduced throttle. The engine coughed once. He ignored it. He guided the L-4 into alignment with the strip. The wheels touched down harder than he liked. The aircraft bounced once, then settled. Mud splashed over the struts. He rolled to a stop. The engine sputtered and died. Silence replaced noise. His ears rang again. Mechanics ran to the aircraft. Their expressions mixed shock and relief. One pointed at bullet holes in the tail, another at scorch marks under the wings. Carpenter climbed out slowly, his legs stiff from cold and stress. He touched the bazooka brackets once. They were empty and blackened. The crew chief approached. He inspected the aircraft without speaking. He traced a finger over the new bullet holes. His jaw tightened. He met Carpenter's eyes. He said only 2 words. "More rockets?" Carpenter nodded. The crew chief nodded back. No humor, no disbelief, only acceptance. The colonel appeared minutes later, mud on his boots. He looked at the aircraft, then at Carpenter. No reprimand came, only a question. "How many today?" Carpenter answered with precise numbers. 2 Tigers, 1 Panther, 1 Panzer IV, 1 bridge column, 2 fuel trucks, multiple soft targets. Verified by artillery. The colonel absorbed the numbers. Slowly. He wrote them down in a small notebook. His pencil scratched quietly. Other pilots gathered again. They examined the aircraft more closely this time. Less skepticism. More calculation. They wanted to understand. To replicate. To survive. Carpenter explained the dive angles, the firing delays, the rocket drop characteristics. He spoke in clipped, exact phrases. One pilot asked how he controlled fear. Carpenter said he didn't. He controlled altitude. Another asked why he used infantry weapons. Carpenter said they were available. Someone brought 6 new rockets. Carpenter checked each one. He inspected fins and fuses. He weighed one in his hand. He nodded. Technicians reloaded the tubes. The metal rang faintly as each rocket slid home. Carpenter watched. Always watched. A mechanic checked the engine. He shook his head once, then twice. He told Carpenter the engine needed a full overhaul. Carpenter asked how many hours it had left. The mechanic said maybe 3. Carpenter said 3 hours was enough. The colonel overheard. He frowned, but said nothing. He walked away, thinking. Carpenter stood by the wing. He rested one gloved hand on the canvas. He felt the tension in the fabric, the vibrations, the life of the aircraft under his palm. Someone handed him a canteen. He drank once. Water tasted metallic, cold. He handed it back. The wind shifted again. Stronger this time. Clouds thickened overhead. A storm brewed at the horizon. The crew chief asked if he wanted to wait out the weather. Carpenter shook his head. Armor moved in bad weather. That made them easier targets. He climbed back into the cockpit. The seat creaked. The metal frame vibrated faintly. He checked the toggle switch again. It clicked just as sharp as before. The copper wire buzzed faintly under current. He started the engine. It caught reluctantly, then steadied. The bazookas hung ready under the wings once more as he rolled forward into the deepening storm.